This video is brought to you by Ground News. As you might have noticed, most European countries are shifting to the right on immigration, with anti-immigration right-wing parties surging in the polls across the continent. However, one conspicuous exception is Spain, where immigration rates have remained high, and Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has recently introduced measures to make it easier for immigrants to settle in Spain, in the hope that they'll fill labour shortages and boost the economy. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Spain's pro-migrant policy, whether it's been successful in propping up the economy, and what could happen next. If you're interested in the political alliances and groupings that shape our world, then you might enjoy our poster, Every Alliance Explained. It shows, in slightly confusing detail, all of the world's major alliances and how different countries link together. Check out the poster as well as the video which explains it by clicking the link in the description. Let's start with some context. Between 1999 and 2010, Spain's population jumped from 40 million to 47 million, as thousands of migrants from all over the world arrived in unprecedented numbers in search of employment. In 1999, migrants made up 2% of Spain's population. This had soared to 12% by 2009, which is equivalent in size to that of Spain's three largest cities combined: Madrid, Barcelona, and Valencia. Today, Spain has one of Europe's highest shares of foreign-born nationals, and it's been relatively easy for these migrants to become part of Spanish society, for at least two reasons. First, successive governments put in a lot of effort to naturalise as many migrants as possible, implementing around 6 regularisation campaigns between 1986 and 2002, which naturalised some 1.2 million people. And second, Spanish public sentiment to immigration is markedly friendlier than basically any other European country. But why is Spain so migrant-friendly? Well, the first and most important reason is that a plurality of migrants, over 4 million of them, are Hispanics from Latin America, so they speak the same language and have very similar cultures, making integration pretty seamless. Second, while Spain has well-functioning public services, it doesn't offer much in the way of direct cash benefits or social housing, which means migrants rarely compete with natives for benefits in the same way they do in other European countries. Third, there's some data to suggest that Spanish media generally portrays migrants more sympathetically than its European counterparts. The UN noted in a 2015 report that, unlike in many other European countries, reporting in Spain's big 3 newspapers was broadly sympathetic to migrants' plight. Fourth and finally, the legacy of Franco's dictatorship made many Spaniards skeptical of nationalism, which has limited far-right, and therefore anti-immigrant, sentiment in mainstream politics. This is one of the reasons that Vox have struggled to break through, and Spanish politics has been more or less dominated by 2 establishment parties: Sanchez's Socialist Workers' Party and the People's Party. Anyways, ever since taking over in 2018, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has maintained a pro-migrant policy as an economic growth strategy, and argued that migrant workers are needed to offset Spain's demographic crisis. For context, Spain's birth rate fell to 1.19 babies per woman last year, the lowest since records began in 1941, and without new migrants, the population is expected to age dramatically and shrink by over a third in the next 70 years. So, to address this, Spain has put real political capital into integrating migrants into Spain's labour market via 3 main mechanisms. First, by large naturalisation campaigns, legalising hundreds of thousands of undocumented migrants living in Spain, with the goal of getting these migrants to work, pay taxes, and support the country's welfare system. For instance, according to Spain's National Statistics Institute, Spain authorised around 458,000 immigrants last year, and in November, the government announced that, over the next 3 years, it would give work permits and legal papers to the 900,000 or so foreigners currently living in Spain illegally. Second, the government has tried to make legal economic migration easier, especially for African migrants. Last summer, Sanchez signed circular migration agreements with Gambia and Mauritania, on top of a previous one with Senegal, which lets workers from these countries come to Spain for short periods to work and then go back home. Finally, the government has made it easier for foreign students to get work visas. For example, new labour reforms have meant that foreign students can now more easily certify their skills, especially in tech and other sectors where there's a shortage of workers. Also, the duration of some visas have been extended. The job seeker visa, for example, has been increased from 3 months to a year. Temporary work permits have also been extended from 2 years to 4 years. As a result, most of Spain's population growth since the pandemic has come from immigration, and most migrants have apparently been well integrated into the labour market, with unemployment levels at their lowest since 2008, although still very high by European standards. Since 2022, around 45% of all jobs created have been filled by around 500,000 new migrant workers, particularly from South American countries. Traditionally, migrants played a key role in filling lower-wage jobs in sectors like construction, retail, transport, and hospitality. However, this trend has shown signs of tapering off, and aside from the hospitality industry, where Spain continues to depend on migrant labour, migrant job growth has been most evident in Spain's booming technology and science sectors, which more than doubled in size between 2018 and 2023. This has in turn propped up Spain's economy, which grew by 3.2% last year, better than both the Eurozone and the EU average. In fact, Spain's GDP growth has consistently outperformed the EU average, and even beat the US last year. What's more, it looks set to pull even further ahead in the coming year. The European Commission forecasts that the Spanish economy will grow by 2.3% in 2025 and then 2.1% in 2026, again outstripping both the EU and other large European economies. A tighter labour market has in turn given way to relatively strong wage growth, with wages currently growing at about 4% annually. Now, of course, this economic growth isn't being solely driven by migration. The recent rebound in tourism, which accounts for an estimated 13% of GDP, has definitely helped. And unlike other big European economies, Spain currently enjoys low energy costs as a result of its extensive renewables network and impressive LNG capacity, which has helped keep inflation down and supported Spain's manufacturing sector. Still, at least according to the Bank of Spain, foreign workers have been the most significant contributors to economic growth in recent years. And looking at the average GDP per capita growth annually, the Bank of Spain estimates that foreign workers contributed between 0.4% and 0.7% to the average 2.9% annual increase between 2022 and 2024. Again, this isn't to say that everything's rosy. Most notably, increased immigration, combined with an uptick in tourism, has put real pressure on Spain's housing market, with rents rising by 80% over the past decade, and the median tenant now spending about 40% of their income on housing costs, compared with an EU average of 27%. These tensions could put political pressure on Sanchez's pro-migrant policies, especially if housing scarcity makes voters see immigration as a zero-sum issue. If you want to know more about this topic, there's plenty of other outlets reporting about it online. Unfortunately though, it's sometimes hard to tell exactly which way these outlets lean politically, making it difficult to understand exactly how your view of world events is being biased by the sources you're reading. That's where this week's sponsor, Ground News, comes in. Their website and app, developed by a former NASA engineer, allows us to pull back the curtain on media bias and have a look at exactly how each story is being covered. For instance, this story about Spain ordering Airbnb to block 65,000 holiday rentals amid rising concerns over the country's housing affordability crisis has been covered by more than 211 sources. We know that around 25 of these have been reported by the left, and 17 of these have been reported by the right. That's not all though. Ground News has tons of genuinely useful features. Take their blind spots feed, for instance. This shows you the stories underreported by one side of the political spectrum or the other. For example, if you lean right, you probably missed this story on the Ross Monaghan gangland shooting in Malaga. Here at TLDR News, we think that Ground News is an incredibly useful tool for our current media landscape, one that's constantly trying to attract your attention and sway you towards or away from certain political viewpoints. So having a tool that helps you spot this and helps you take action really is a game changer. If you're interested in everything Ground News has to offer, you can get 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage Plan subscription by using the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. This limited time offer is only available here, so make sure you go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link in the description to get started and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.